That's all right, Noah. I'll just ask him if, I'll just say he'll be joining shortly.
Okay.
All right.
So Jeanette, now you're joined twice. Do you
That
know
I know. One moment,
Okay.
please.
I'm trying to go only once.
Okay.
I can't get my packet on my iPad, so I'm trying to do that. So I'll sign out of this one. So what I do? So,
I think you can keep both if you mute one.
I don't think she wants both. She's trying to
Oh,
get
okay.
on her computer for her packet, and so she's setting her iPad up for her.
Okay.
okay. So shall I get off?
Space.
I think we're live, Dan.
Are we?
Yep.
All right, Jeanette, I'm going to go ahead, but yeah, please mute so it doesn't echo. Oh, excuse me. Good evening. I'm Daniel Drake, Chair of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission. I call the April 13th, 2021 Airport Commission meeting to order. We're using Zoom webinar for this meeting, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Attendees must register to participate. The registration link is unique to the meeting. The registration link can be found in the description of the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed for the meeting. People registering as an attendee must use their full names, otherwise they will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. Attendees will join in listening mode and they can click the raise hand button if they choose to speak. Chair will call on those who have raised their hand in the order in which they were raised. If you do not have a audio capable device, you can use a call-in number. We will not be using the YouTube chat function. All questions should be directed through the chair. As a preliminary matter, permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Commission members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Arthur Gasparo.
Here.
Tony Buscarin.
Here.
Andrea Planzer.
Here?
Jeanette Topham. She's waving to indicate she's here. Okay. Airport staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Tom Rafter, airport manager.
Here.
Noah Carberg, assistant manager.
Here.
Katie Perales, office manager.
Here.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Rich Lasden, McFarland Johnson, Inc.
Here.
Jed Merrow, McFarland Johnson, Inc.
Here.
Mina Makarios of Anderson and Krieger Airport Council.
Here.
Thank you. This open meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth resulting from the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The governor's order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. We do also allow public participation as outlined previously using Zoom webinar. As previously noted for this meeting, the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission is convening by video conference via Zoom webinar and broadcasting on the Town of Nantucket YouTube channel. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials for the meeting have been provided to members of this body and are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. Before we now turn to the first item on the agenda, permit me to cover some ground rules to provide for the effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Again, I would note that this meeting is being both audio and video recorded. Mr. Rafter also has an announcement.
Yes, I just want to remind the commissioners, I believe there's 2 commission seats that expire. And the applications for commissioner are due on May 21st. According to the select board packet, June 2nd will be an opportunity to introduce yourselves and then review applications. And I believe committee appointments are then going to be made on June 23rd. So I just want to remind, I believe the 2 seats that are up, Mr. Chair, are yours and Andrea Planzer. So I just wanted to make you aware of that deadline of May 21st for applications.
Thank you. Mr. Gasparo, do you have an announcement?
Yes, thank you. I would just like to announce that I will be recusing from any discussions related to the water line and the water service policy. So I will log off of the meeting when the time comes and then log back on.
Thank you. Are there any comments on the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is adopted as presented. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of February 16, 2021 or March 9, 2021? 2016 was a special meeting and March 9 was a regular meeting. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve those 2 sets of minutes?
I'll make
So
that
moved.
motion.
Mr. Buscarin, do you second Ms. Topham? Thank you. All in favor? Oh, sorry, roll call. Ms. Topham, Ms. Planzer,
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo.
Aye.
Is there a motion to ratify the warrants of March 10, 2021 and March 24, 2021?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Topham. All
Dan,
in
can I just
favor?
interrupt you? Did you put both minutes together?
Yes, I
Both
did.
Okay, just wanted to make sure they both got approved. Okay.
Yes. How do you vote on the warrants, Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer,
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Pending leases and contracts, Mr. Rafter?
I'll try to get through these fairly quickly. The first is still pending. That's a license with Gamma Aviation to perform aircraft maintenance. The next is an airline lease with Elite Airways for $27,936.68 plus landing fees. That's for a seasonal airline agreement. Next is a counter freight agreement with Cape Air We have a lease agreement with Hagedorn Aviation for $12,500 for temporary use of a portion of Hangar 8. The next one is still pending, and that is the Hagedorn Aviation hangar lease. We have a contract amendment number 2 with Water Filtration of New England, doing business as Culligan for $8,124 for an additional pellet system installation that had to be added due to some unforeseen circumstances. We have a contract with AC Marine in the amount of $44,620 to remove pilings at Great Harbor Yacht Club. Next, we have a contract amendment with Jacobs for $216,297. That's supplemental number 3 for additional work associated with PFAS on the taxiway Echo project. We then have a contract amendment with McFarland Johnson for $2,648 for botanical survey work for the waterline extension. We have another contract with McFarland Johnson for $14,100 for gate planning task order, and that is to help us identify additional space for the commercial service aircraft on the ramp. We have a contract with McFarland for $187,000 for the geometry study and ALP update. That's an AIP funded project that will be subject to FAA grant as well as ATM approval and appropriation. We have another contract with McFarland Johnson for $24,900 to update our disadvantaged business enterprise plan for construction and concessions, and that will also be part of the grant associated with the above project. Next is still pending, and that's another contract regarding PFAS phase 2 source area identification. We have a contract with Carbon Filtration Systems for $19,350. It was originally identified as the 23,000 number for the purchase of a PFAS industrial treatment system that we're using to remediate the water that's being drained out of the fuel farm. And the next, although it's shown as pending, excuse me, I'd like to ask the commission to authorize the chairman to approve this. It's a contract with Trask Petroleum Equipment for $27,116 for an overfill prevention system for the fuel farm. This is a regulatory requirement that we have to have done and will be part of our inspection. That's why I'd like to ask the approval so we can get it done as soon as possible. We're just waiting for some additional paperwork to come in from the vendor, but it's been put out to bid, it's been reviewed, and we need to move forward with that. If we could get the approval, I'd appreciate that. And then we still have pending the plume identification.
Are there any questions or comments on the pending contracts? Hearing none, I think we'll do this with 2 motions. I would like a motion to approve the contracts as listed with the airline lease agreement with Elite Airways, the counter freight agreement with Hyannis Air Service, the lease agreement with Hagedorn Aviation for Hangar 8 on a temporary basis, the contract amendment with Water Filtration of New England, the contract with AC Marine and General Contracting, the contract amendment with Jacobs Engineering Group, contract amendment with McFarland Johnson, the contract with McFarland Johnson for gate planning and field assistance, the contract with McFarland Johnson for the geometry study and airport layout plan update, and a contract with McFarland Johnson for the disadvantaged business enterprise program update, as well as the contract with Carbon Filtration Systems, Inc. For the PFAS industrial GAC purchase for the fuel farm. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is it second, Ms. Planzer?
Yes.
Thank you. How do you vote, Ms. Top? Is there any discussion? Sorry. How do you vote, Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. I will entertain a motion to approve the contract or with Trask Petroleum pending its receipt and approval by airport administration, and permit the authorization of the chair to sign the contract when ready to permit it to go forward.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. How do you vote, Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Ms. Planzer,
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you all very much. All right, Mr. Rafter, the home rule petition.
Just continuing communication with our representatives to impress upon them how important that is. And again, with the various funding pots coming out of Washington, we really need to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. And that's why that home rule petition is going to be critical. So we're continuing to, or I should say, NOAA's continuing to have dialogue with them on that. Next, we have the PFAS standard monthly report, which is in the packet. And then we have a draft of the homeowner agreement for water service, which I'll turn it over to Noah to give you a brief on that. And then any questions, discussion, we need to have some, I think, a vote taken and some decisions made possibly, or at least for further discussion.
Who's going to start on the update investigation?
Noah, you want
Noah,
to start and then
Mr. Carberg?
Yeah, I was going to introduce the update and then defer to Airport Council, Mina Macarius. So what I've included in the packet for you is the engineer's opinion of probable costs associated with the water service project west of the airport. And this is the effort to supply municipal water service to those residents where water is available at the curb, but those residents are on wells. We have this broken out by address of ownership and detailed site plans of each location. Each home site is fairly unique, and we are still waiting on prorating some costs such as police detail, patching of the pavement afterwards, and I believe a few miscellaneous items that Mark will supply. One of the major open items associated with this engineer's opinion, the cost that is not included or reflected, is if the airport commission wishes to entertain paying all or part, and if so, of what duration, of residents' water bills. These residents will be assuming water bills where they had not previously had these bills. And that was something that I believe we stated last month that we would bring to the commission for their discussion. It's not included in this packet. It's been included in a subsequent email and will be posted. There are 2 emails written by affected residents stating their preferences for how they would like you to proceed. A 3rd resident indicated his preference for addressing the commission at this topic. I did not see the person in the attendee list, but maybe they will pop on. I think that's a good introduction. I was going to defer to Dan, to you, and then to Mina to sort of defend what some concerns that staff have for sort of a revenue use standpoint for the airport assuming or paying for residential water bills. If that's all right.
Thank you, Mr. Carberg. I think this is a discussion we have to have tonight because in order to get the water service agreement, which we also must approve, out there and available to affected residents, particularly the Noverdeer Way Evergreen ones, we've got to get it out there and signed so we can proceed with the work. I do have one question, Mr. Carberg. Do we need to go ahead and authorize these specific expenditures for the individual homes as estimated by the engineer, or Mr. Macarius, you may have a view on that?
I'll defer to Mina, but my understanding, Dan, is these aren't, because these are being handled at an individual home site and we will be proceeding with the DCAM waiver, that there isn't a typical contracting mechanism for the commission. to
Well,
see.
I meant as much approving the expenditure as approving a contract.
That I will defer to Mina.
You can, I think that if the question is whether to approve an overall expenditure, you can certainly set an upper limit or a per home limit. But in terms of actual payments, the contract would be to McFarland Johnson or to the appropriate contractor at the appropriate time. The expenditures for water service, I think, is the one that requires a little bit further discussion.
Right, correct. But I'm thinking of these amounts that are stated in here totaling what, somehow $400,000 roughly. Where is it? No, it's $223,000. So would it be fair to ask for an authorization for the construction of the water connections? To ask for approval of, say, $250,000?
I'll defer to Rich and Jed on the actual amount, but yes, it'd be fair to approve the contract amount with some delta for potential changes.
So, Mr.
Could
Chairman,
I-
this is
Yeah.
Rich. So we have costs from the plumber for each individual home, and we have costs from a landscaper for each individual home. So those are, at this point, sort of set prices. And then we have a working cost from the water company to do the street taps, and then a price to do the remainder of the work from the street tap to the house. So all of those prices at this point are fairly fixed prices. You could take that 230, if that was the number, and sort of divide it by, I think there was 11 connections to sort of come up with a rough average of what each one would be, but they are all different. It's all different lengths.
No,
of
I
pipe.
understand they're all different.
Yep.
I'm not talking about approving the individual ones.
Yep.
I'm
So
talking
overall,
about
overall of a 250 would probably be fine. Yes.
I'll ask for a motion to approve the 250 for the physical connections as outlined in McFarland Johnson's opinion of probable costs. Is there such a motion? Nobody wants to make that motion, huh?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Topham. Is there a second? There's a second from Mr. Buscarin. Is there any discussion on that? Any questions?
This is not for their monthly bills, is it?
This
It's
is
for the
that's correct.
construction And
This is
setting
for
up
the
for 11
physical,
homes.
this is for the physical connections.
Right, okay, thank you.
Hearing no other comments, I ask you, how do you vote, Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer,
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Thank you, and the chair votes aye. Okay, now to the $64 question or $64,000 question. The issue on the table is the payment of the water bills. We have received, as you know, 2 letters from citizens who are impacted, asking that we basically pay their water bills in perpetuity, at least as long as presumably they own the property. The individual who was going to come tonight, I understand, was going to take the same position. So that's three of the 3 residents. I think one of them well, they're all affected by the first stage of this, right, Mr. Carberg?
That's correct.
So, the issue is, what is the airport willing and, more importantly, able to do in this respect? I, you know, from a human standpoint, it would be great to be able to say yes, but I don't think we can do that. And I'll ask Mr. Makarios to get into that in a minute. From a fiscal standpoint, obviously, the less that we pay, the better off the airport is. As you can see, we're already spending over between $25,000 and $30,000 for all of these hookups. So I'm wondering, I mean, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Makarios, but basically the position of the FAA is that if the airport undertakes to pay any water bills for residents, it's sticking its neck out and won't receive any support from the FAA. Is that a fair statement?
I wouldn't say it's that far. They haven't really addressed this particular issue before. And they are, especially in this context, the closest example it's being currently done in Alaska, I think, is a very limited amount of money involved. The issue is that typically revenue used for payment of infrastructure utilities not related to the airport is something that they consider revenue diversion. However, here it would be done in connection with environmental remediation. They, after consulting with them, they're very comfortable with what is frankly a novel approach of putting in the water system, but they were comfortable with that because it's more efficient than remediation. The ongoing utility costs, the water costs, are not directly tied to stopping the risk of from the contaminated water, and isn't a direct cost of remediation. And so FAA, in the answers we've gotten, has said they would feel that remediation obligations are done once a water system is provided, either municipal or a POET, and they wouldn't think that there's any obligation to pay that water. They think within small amounts as a way to induce someone to switch to municipal water service, perhaps a transitional amount, they might think would be justified, but they really can't opine on it unless such an amount was challenged by, let's say, the airlines or other aeronautical users as revenue diversion, and they were faced with it. Candidly, my view is it's a risk. The smaller the amount, the smaller the risk. The more confined the amount and the more sort of uniform in the sense that it's up to X dollars. I think the easier it is to defend the choice because it is really as a part of the package of providing municipal water service, as opposed to an ongoing cost. And the last thing I'll say is the closest analog to this that FAA has dealt with over the years is sound insulation. So as you probably know, within the 65 decibel zone around an airport, airports are permitted to provide some financial assistance for sound insulation. However, FAA has been very clear that airports cannot provide maintenance costs that might therefore be increased because of the presence of the insulation. So if putting insulation in someone's home at the airport's costs the homeowner in the future to have to spend more money on, say, the kinds of windows they get, or to retrofit other parts of the building, the FAA believes that cost should be borne by the homeowner. They've been made whole from the noise issue. So I think there is some risk in extending to municipal, to paying the water bills. But again, how big the risk is, it's hard to tell. And obviously, the smaller the spend, the smaller the risk.
All right, thank you. There is another way to look at this, which I think might be the fairest. That some of the people in some of these properties are retirees on fixed incomes. And I think we might want to consider whether or not we should apply some income test to people who want reimbursement. And if they, across the board, fit that test, then then they would receive some help from the airport on their bills. Whether that could be indefinite or not, I don't know. I think it's all part of the package. I was talking to a couple of people today, and one suggested, I was asking about the income tests for that are used in connection with various kinds of affordable housing, house rentals and house purchases and so forth. And they range from anywhere from 80% to 170% of what is called the annual mean income, which is the standard that is used in the housing world. The annual mean income on Nantucket's $116,000. So, the number, if we use something like 150%, it would be upwards of $150,000. I don't think we have enough information to make a decision on any of this tonight. And I think unless we want to decide we're just not going to do anything, in which case we can go ahead and make that decision. But I think it's worth exploring a little more what the impact might be if we applied such a test. I mean, clearly the houses in my view, the seasonal homes should not be part of any subsidy. And the rest of them, of which there are probably maybe 15, maybe not quite that many, we would have to see. One estimate was that maybe half of them would qualify for some kind of income test, but we don't know that for sure. So I don't know. I'd love to hear from the other commissioners how they feel on this issue.
I think if we get into any kind of income test or anything like that, we're asking for a lot of trouble. Like, how do we decide it? What counts as income? I just think that that's really creating a big mess when you're trying to, whether you get money from us or not, we come up with criteria based on their income. I don't know.
I don't think we should get involved in means testing at all, nor should we get involved in discriminating between people that live here full time, who in my view already get a pretty much of a free ride from the non-voting taxpayers on the island. If we do anything, I'd be in favor of a fixed number. My water bill is fairly low, in the neighborhood of $30 or $40 a month. If the most I'd be willing to do would be to give everybody who's affected a fixed sum of money, which is simple, it's equitable. We don't have to worry about anybody's income or what their status is, full-time here or not. And I would think something in the neighborhood of $200 to $500 each would be plenty. The only question we'd have beyond that is, do we require a release from them, if we're going to pay them money on a volunteer basis, you know, why wouldn't we get a release for any future property damage resulting from water bills that we might be exposed to? You know, if I got a $500 check and was signed a simple release, you know, I'd probably sign it. I don't know how other people feel about that.
Well, I mean, again, Mr. Macarios can talk about this later. I'd like to call on Ms. Topham and see what her views are.
I agree with Ms. Planzer in that I don't think we can discriminate because we're getting into problems of age and seniors, because we might have families that they might look good on paper, but they have a lot more expenses because they've got children still at home. So I don't know. I kind of like the idea of giving a one lump sum. I'm not sure how much is good enough for the people, because again, I might say $500, that's not doing anything for me. I don't know.
All right. Well, but I think the consensus then is that we not apply an income test. And perhaps the consensus is that we provide some kind of lump sum payment to all people who hook up to the sewer line.
I think that sounds like a good idea. I mean, because other than that, we could be paying for years. You know, you've got, what you say, at 13, 15 homes. So even
Well,
at,
they're actually more than that, because I wasn't including the Maddox-Sham Valley Road homes in that
Okay.
number.
Yeah.
So it's probably something in about 25.
I think it's definitely worth, you know, another meeting, more data, more, you know, to decide if that's really the way to go. In other words, not making a decision right away. Yeah, that's what we'll do, but talk about it and figure out what makes sense. Or
Mr. Carberg, what is in your view, the sort of drop dead date for getting this issue resolved? I know you'd like it done yesterday.
Correct me if I'm wrong. We are looking to start these services as soon as possible. All of the pieces are coming together to start with the excavations and the homes that were first affected. Certainly, I don't believe that we need to have it resolved to initiate the service. If the commission decides that providing, I'm going to use the word stipend is appropriate, I think that it could in fact be retroactive without delaying the installation of water service.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Rafter.
I apologize. I had to excuse myself there for a minute, and maybe you discussed this, but I think we also need to look at the other side of the coin and ask Mina for input on, you know, what if somebody elects not to hook into the system and not to sign an agreement? What our obligations are and what notice we should give or how we should handle that.
Mr.
Just so we're
Macario?
prepared to deal with both sides of it, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is related in some ways to Mr. Biscarin's question as well. If someone refuses to hook into the system, there is a process typically used for access issues with DEP, whereby a party that's doing implementing a remedy asks for permission, then asks for help from DEP, documents permission to do something was denied, asks for help from DEP, and usually at that point the department gets involved to determine whether the requests that have been made are reasonable or not, and whether and at that point the LSP would have to document whether basically as much as can be done has been done. You would not necessarily be obligated to run a POET system forever or to provide bottled water forever if a much more efficient and cheaper alternative is readily available but a property owner is balking at it and has a preference for a different one. So Chapter 21E, the state hazardous waste law, would cover that. That being said, what is reasonable is not an easy test. And so whether DEP would agree that requiring a release, for instance, of all claims in the future is reasonable or not, they typically, for access agreements, do not allow the potentially responsible party to insist on that. They have pushed back on, in cases that I'm aware of, on that kind of requirement. So whether, certainly asking upfront, if you get them, it's great, but if you don't, you may not be able to insist on it in the long term in exchange for the water payment.
So you're saying that there is no assurance that if we made the water hookup available outside a house and the homeowner did not approve it, that we would not have continuing responsibility for the maintenance of the POET system?
There's no assurance because it ends up being a fact-based issue, and how much DEP is sympathetic to the argument or not at that point. However, I feel pretty confident and that if you have put in the POET initially, which is what you did, you've cut off access to the source material, you're no longer using the source material or containing it, and you're offering water service, that's a very good argument that you've gone above and beyond your obligations, especially where, keep in mind that every site that tests above those levels for PFAS, by virtue of just being the owner of the property, you become a potentially responsible party yourself. So the airport doing it for you, doing it for the homeowner is already a step beyond that.
I'm sorry, Mina, one important point of clarification. For these 7 homes, we have not installed POET systems. The initial plan was to bring the water service directly. So for these 7 homeowners, they do not have POET systems
But
currently.
they do have bottled water.
But they do have bottled water being supplied.
Right. Thank you, Noah. Sorry about that. Yes, you are, either way, you're mitigating that risk from the contamination right away. And so I think, to put it in sort of a different perspective, if you were unable to get access to do the preferred remedy, a third party that is not in charge of a remedy that affects off-site sources can't decide for you which remedy they prefer. That's pretty clear. If they, however, try to contest it by saying you owe me, the homeowner, damages or for either lost property value or for my own work to remedy the situation, they'd have an incredibly weak claim if you have offered a reasonable alternative like the water system at no cost to them that was refused. And so that's, there's no certainties that I could, put a stamp and a guarantee on, but I think it's a very good case for the airport, given everything you've done so far.
If I may, Mr. Chair, to
Yes,
Mina.
sir.
Mina, so would we include then in the agreement some type of notice that we're making this offer and we'll be removing the POET, or I don't know, how does that work? Is it a separate issue? How do we treat that?
Tom, I'm a little bit reluctant to say, ahead of time on any particular case, exactly how it might play out in each case. I think if you're offering the agreement and you're offering it to everybody and you're getting, again, you've sort of had this clear through multiple community meetings that this is what you're planning to do. I think that is a reasonable approach. Making it clear that you're not going to put both remedies in, you're not doing a water system and POET, I think is important. There's no need for both. That's redundant from an environmental mitigation standpoint. I think that is sufficient. You don't necessarily, I don't think you need to be explaining that there was another potential remedy. It's no different than if you had done your own alternatives analysis before putting in any poets years ago, 2 years ago, and said, we will just do a water system.
Is it possible to put something in the draft water agreement to say that this is pending? Or is it likely that people would not sign it until it's nailed down?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure which part you mean is pending.
The part about reimbursement.
You could do that if, to the extent that it's actually an inducement for some people to sign. Obviously, some people might wait on that. But again, I think that is based on the amounts that you're talking about. Probably at the end of the day, not the main driver for for the overall cost. Although for an individual homeowner, it might matter a great deal.
Mr. Rafter, Mr. Carberg, what do you think the best way to go forward here is?
Well, I guess I'd like to just clarify a few points. I guess what I'm hearing is you'd like either suggestion from us as to what an amount or time frame by which we would, provide some consideration. Or I guess that's what I'm trying to get. Are you looking for a definitive fixed rate number or a average number or, number of months recommendation?
Or a range, maybe a range on the amounts from X dollars to
So,
Y dollars.
all right. So, but what I guess you're looking at considering a flat fee to everyone. Is that what I'm hearing?
A flat one-time fee seems to be the consensus.
Okay. And you're looking for the range so you can discuss what's reasonable. Okay.
Right. So we could put something in. We'll have to go back to the commissioners and see if this makes sense to them when we're finished this part of the discussion.
So we can get the research from the water company, what the average bills may be,
Right.
and come back with some analytical data on that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we could have a special meeting if we need to. But let me poll the commissioners. If the water service agreement said something to the effect that the airport will make a payment, a one-time payment to each affected homeowner in an amount to be determined, but in a range between, let's say, $300 and $500. Would that make sense to you, Ms. Planzer?
Well, I sure would like to know more information before we even do a range, like some kind of criteria or what the bills are, what if we do it like month, I don't know. I'd rather have something than to already tie us into a, and what is our time frame that we have to, that this is important? What's our time frame? What's our
And Mr. Carberg?
There are multiple time frames. The feedback we've gotten from residents are that they wanted water service connected to their homes and they wanted it yesterday. We have a regulatory time frame where we initially told Mass DEP we think we can accomplish this within 6 to 9 months after sampling. And Mina can go further into that detail because the technical answer is, well, it's longer than 9 months,
But that's not true. I mean, that's not true for Nobody Your Way and Evergreen, right? That's basically what we're talking about, and that can be the prototype for everybody else.
The We are talking about 6 to 9 months because that's initially the timeline we provided to Mass DEP for our justification for skipping over a traditional POET install and providing water service. And that's the time frame that we've messaged to the residents in this area. And, and granted, we have sampled these affected residents over different courses of step outs. So it's not necessarily that all 7 should be approached within the next month, but we're getting to the time frame where the very first residents that we've sampled, if we want to honor that 6 to 9 month commitment, we do want to move forward with relative haste.
If I may, I think something to mention here is that we're ready to go, is basically the bottom line. And I think once this decision is made, this is the only, I believe, hurdle that we have to overcome before we can turn contractors loose and get them in there. Is that correct, Noah?
That's correct. The outstanding items are a DCAM waiver and their internal about interdepartmental billing.
Okay, so time is close to being of the essence here.
And we have to make the decision of that we're going to pay them part of their water bills. That has to be made before we start anything, or can we leave it as we may, like?
Right.
I mean, is that part of the whole?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think that's going to be the inducement for somebody to sign the agreement to allow us to do the work.
Okay.
I mean, if I were the resident, I'd be hesitant to sign without knowing exactly what it is, because then I sign and you say, okay, now you're not getting anything. I don't know.
Yeah, I favor a $500 payment to everybody. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to hook this water system up. We're going to give you $500, and I think that's, you need a flat position. You can't say to be decided later, as Tom rightly points out. You need to give them a deal. What's the deal? I think we should have a deal and offer it to them. And I think most people, when presented with that, we're going to hook you up to the town water. We're going to pay your water bill, it sounds like, for a year. And,
Right.
If someone wants to water their lawn, they can use their old pump for that.
I think, if I may, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Buscarin's point, I think the issue there, Tony, is that we're looking for some basis or understanding of, if we say 500, what does that represent? Is that 2 months? Is it 3 months? Is it 3 years? So we need to get a little more data so that the commissioners can be better informed as to what the number should be or what they feel comfortable with. Is that correct, Mr. Chair?
That's a sense I get from Ms. Planzer. We haven't heard from Ms. Topham yet.
I'm thinking that we should talk to Mark Willett at the water company and see what he thought would be a fair amount. I'm not sure if 500 is too much or too little, because I've talked to some people and some of their bills are $100 a month. Maybe they've got irrigation. I don't know. I think we should get some kind of an amount of money and then pay it and offer them to them. I think getting a new water service would be lovely. Because I know my sister is paying $40,000, I think, to get something into her house, or maybe it was sewer. I don't know what it was, but a lot of money people have been paying.
So
Yeah, Mr. Rafter.
I don't want to put Noah on the spot here. I'm just trying to think of what type of time frame we may need to gather information and the type of information we're looking at. I'm assuming it would be, we would attempt to get from the water company, if they could share this with us, what either the actual water bills are or the average water bills are for these impacted residents, and then at least provide that data to the commission so that you can make an informed decision.
I think that makes sense.
Is that?
You
Noah,
think
something
2 weeks is unreasonable to do that?
We could probably have this information in 48 hours based off of the experience that my counterpart in Fairbanks provided and the data that the water company has available. It's very easy to get a historical average use, whether it's for a specific range of households or an average family of 4, convert that by a multiplier of a number of months and come out with a fixed amount. It's not a very very large lift if you were so inclined. If the commission wanted to outline these steps, that they wanted a average family of 4 as a baseline for 6 months, we could execute based on those terms. But I'm not trying to put a policy into your mouth.
How do you feel about that, Ms. Planzer?
Well, I kind of want a more concrete, just some number that we see, some numbers before we say, even average family. I mean, I don't know. I'd like to see, some real.
Well, I think if we got numbers for a family of 2 and a family of 4, I mean, we can go every permutation and combination past that. But I think, from my perspective, that would be enough.
I agree.
Yeah, well, I'd like to see those numbers. In other words, instead of saying, oh yeah, that's good. I don't know how much that is. So I don't know what I would be committing.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Buscarin?
Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I have a water bill here in Sconset, and I know what it is. And, if somebody offered me $500 and a free hookup, I'd be dancing a jig. It would pay my water bill for more than a year if I don't use my irrigation system. So that's a pretty good deal. I don't think there's any.
I don't know how Sconset rates compare to Wanna rates, but anyway.
I would bet.
I think probably the best thing to do is to get this information of, average water bills, ex irrigation from Wanna for two person household and a 4-person household, and see what they are, and multiply them out for 6 months and see what the number is.
Okay.
Is that agreeable to everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Rafter.
So would you like then, if we get this rather quickly or certainly before the next meeting, would you entertain a special to simply vote on that?
I would.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have suggestions very often, but I just have one suggestion.
Then it's, you have the floor, Ms. Perez.
I'm wondering if it's possible to make a motion stating what you had said about the 2-person family, 4-person family, or maybe pick one of them for the 6 months, and that we gather that data. And if it comes out that it's $500 or below, then we could proceed with that number.
I think rather not. And actually, what I'd rather have is the annual average monthly bill.
And then multiply that by 6 months.
Yeah, then we can multiply it any way we want.
Okay, so you want to
But
have
I
more
do think
discussion on that.
You're avoiding trying to have another meeting, which I commend, but I think we need to have it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another meeting once we get the figures.
Right.
Right.
So why don't you see what you can get from Wanna, Mr. Carberg, and when you're satisfied with the number you have, we can either try to schedule a meeting now, but I'd rather wait to make sure you have everything
Right.
before scheduling it. So either, I would prefer, I'm going to be away next week. I prefer not to do it next week, but I'm happy to do it Monday or Tuesday of the following week. Is that agreeable to everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else on this topic?
I have one minor item still on the PFAS heading.
Mm-hmm.
That relates to the water main installation. the last thing before releasing the design documents for bid and a late summer to fall construction is just overcoming some hurdles with Matacasham Valley Road. The trench and fill portion of construction is going to be difficult to accommodate in the road right of way, maintain stability of the cut trench, and have traffic pass. So what I would like to give Mr. Laston at a staff level is direction to implement the Matacasham Valley Road, especially the central and eastern portion of construction, later in the fall after Labor Day, just in order to avoid traffic conflicts. I think it's the right decision, but it's one that I didn't want to make without at least bringing to the commission's attention for the project time frame. So hopefully all of the other portions of the water line could start construction in the summer, but this portion of Matacasham Valley Road would be later in the fall.
Mr. Laston, do you have any comments on that?
So yes, I'll just give you a briefing. MVR is, as we've talked about many times, doesn't travel on the right of way. It travels on traveled way, which is not wide enough to have vehicles or people pass by during construction. So we looked at a series of options. One of the options was to use the airport perimeter road as a detour road. We discussed that internally and then discussed it with the TSA, who denied that usage. So we looked into constructing a second fence on the interior of the perimeter road, or directional drilling the entire length of MVR and putting in a second fence on the interior of the perimeter road was about $750,000. And directional drilling the entire length of MVR was in another $1.2 million. So that's where we came up with these. That's where we came up with these options of, and the other two options left are either doing construction, quote, when we want, but doing it at night. I understand the water department is doing some night construction now for, I don't know if it's water or sewer, but they're actually doing some night construction on the island somewhere. Or the last option was delaying it, since the majority of those homes are seasonal homes, delay it until after the rental season is over.
Yeah, I could see the dust and so forth being a problem out there in the summer anyway.
Yep.
Is there any objection to delaying that end of the project until the fall on the part of any commissioner?
No.
I see two shaking heads and hear one no. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Corona or anything else on that topic?
Mr. Chair, I assume you don't need me for the remainder of this. And
I don't think so. Thank you very much, Mr.
get the rest of
McCarron.
my colleagues later. So thank you.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. Airport Coronavirus Relief Grant Program, grant agreement for $1,526,920. I have already signed it, so I would appreciate a motion in favor of ratifying that grant agreement.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a
Second.
Second.
Mr.
Thank
Chair,
Yes, sir.
is Commissioner Gasparo back on, or should we?
Oh, no, he
contact
isn't. No, he isn't.
him?
Have you texted him, Ms. Morales?
Yes, I can.
Sorry, I just noticed that.
Yeah, good catch. Actually, I'm gonna ask, I think we should let after we do that one item, we should let Mr. McNeil go ahead with his presentation, if nobody objects to that, so he can get home and then go on with the EAEIR. Is that all right with everybody?
Did you see my head?
I did. Everybody indicated they thought it was fine.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hang on just a second, Rob. We're waiting for Arthur Gasparo. Sorry, I can't mute my clock.
Saw the number go up, but I didn't see anybody. Oh,
Number just went down.
Arthur is in as an attendee right now. I don't know if we have to. Not a panelist. There you go.
See him?
You're muted, Katie.
I put so he could talk, so he maybe he can tell us what's going on.
I'm here.
Okay. We switched the order. Rob McNeil's going to go next with the presentation on Delta Field's Noblier Way campus. Go ahead, Mr. McNeil.
Thanks again. I appreciate the opportunity to come before the commission with a conceptual proposal to look to the future development of the DPW campus. For some time, DPW has been doing some schematic design conceptualization for the future of the DPW campus out here at 188 Nantucket Road, as well as a couple sites outside of the existing campus. One site was out off of Bunker Road, and this particular site is generally in the general vicinity of the Delta Fields off of Sun Island. So we had worked together with our consultants to take a look at utilization of some far corner of the airport property. I should really back up a step and say, looking outside of the existing DPW campus was both something suggested by at least one member of the existing select board, as well as something that our consultants picked up on when looking at hurricane inundation maps currently available through our GIS. So things that we've talked about is looking for a site that is, if we were to move, to find a site that is more centralized to the island to more efficiently provide services to each corner of the island, hopefully along a more industrialized thoroughfare. And certainly the airport is the general area for that. So with two existing facilities that we maintain, one, the currently land bank owned Nobody Farm Fields, and then the Delta Fields, obviously off of Sun Island, it seemed pretty obvious to us that this particular corner of the airport property made some sense to take a look at. So I can either share my screen, or Katie, I'm not sure if you have the two sheets that were provided. I could do either.
Rob, you're welcome to share.
Okay, thank you. All right, can folks see that? This, I think I can blow this up a little bit. Well, so I had them labeled just to make it easy for everybody to see. Ultimately, one off of Sun Island in the general vicinity of the existing Delta fields would be utilized for the proposed DPW campus. Two would be set aside as sort of a buffer between existing housing and future uses on 1 and 3. And we've discussed as potential for housing and particularly potential for airport housing. 3 would be a reconfiguration of the Delta fields. 4 was something that was shared with me during a meeting back in March when I met with Dan and Tom and Noah to float this first idea and to get some feedback so I could come back to you as a full commission tonight. And so we've taken some time to reconfigure our original concept based on some initial input. And 4 was the proposed boat storage area expanded, and 5 is obviously the Nobody Air complex. So this is the existing layouts. The second page that I just pulled up is the proposed, or I would say a very conceptual proposed layout that fills out those spaces as described. Kind of backing our way over, if you can see my cursor, from 5, which is the Nobody Air field complex. Currently, the synthetic turf field is the center location. And then there's a grass field to the west, and there's a grass field to the south. The white structure is currently proposed as the Nobody Air field house. And ultimately, that is going through final permitting right now. It's on the town meeting and election vote for supplemental funding. And if approved, is expected, it's actually out to bid right now. It's expected to be constructed this summer if approved through that regime. The fourth field at the complex is something that was proposed during the recently accepted Parks and Rec master plan, and the associated parking lot for that would be part of that future expansion. So adjacent to that was the Delta fields, and the Delta fields were reimagined to a configuration that looked a little bit different than this, but based on feedback and input, as I described from Dan, Noah, and Tom last month, we've gotten back to the drawing table to sort of lump all of the recreational use together to create a far broader and more conducive space that I think would be significantly easier to split off as specific recreational use. That would have a parking lot associated with it, additional squared or rectangular space for multi-use fields, and then as the Parks and Rec master plan had recommended, softball and baseball together. There's also a fair amount of open space for additional types of recreation, as well as a playground concept that would tie together nicely, considering some of the nearby residential uses. So the DPW campus is essentially replacing the uses that we currently have out here. I'd say the largest goal is to centralize our fleet into one specific garage type building, similar to what the airport has achieved. And beyond that, bringing together shop space and really making our efficient use of a single campus where we have some members of our staff that occupy other spaces in other municipal facilities currently. as well as just, as I mentioned, the overview of the centralizing the site to the island would have some long-term efficiencies. And so this would utilize space that's currently been subdivided, was intended for long-term lease. And I think I wanted to at least present this to the commission tonight, get some feedback and see if this is a viable option that we could move forward with and continue discussions with both the town management and with the commission through Tom and the current chair, Dan, to be able to explore where we can go from here. With that, I'm happy to try to answer any questions or just take feedback and input to go forward.
Mr. Chair, I have one question, if I may.
Go ahead.
Rob, do you happen to know what the acreage is of 1 and 3?
Sure. Just for reference, area 1 is 9.3 acres roughly. Area 2 is 2.5 acres. Area 3 was 18.7 acres. Area 4 is 3/4 of an acre. And area 5 is 18.2 acres.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Rafter?
No, I think it's very interesting. I kind of like what you did from, after our conversation, the way you flipped the fields and put them all together. That's interesting. That's a good idea.
There's still nobody or farm road between them, but that has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
It's still going to stay there, no matter what. Anyway, Ms. Topham, do you have any questions or comments? I can't see you, so I'm just asking. Ms. Planzer, do you?
I don't.
Mr. Buscarin?
No questions. Looks very interesting.
Okay, would you take the screen share down now, please, Rob?
Sure.
So I can see everybody.
Mr. Chair, I did see Ms. Topham speaking, so she might have been muted while she was giving comment.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Topham, did you have any comment? You're muted. You're muted now.
I was trying to get my bearings as to where it was. It's been a long time since I've been out to those fields since my children were playing baseball and all. So I don't know. It's fine, whatever it is. Thank you.
Okay. All right, what are the next steps, Mr. McNeil?
Well, from my perspective, I think the town, if the commission is open to it, I believe the town would work together with the director, Mr. Rafter, to be able to put together a sort of a formal proposal to try to move this concept forward. Our engineers stand ready to, conduct additional studies. I think one of the things that was raised at the first meeting was that we need to expect a formal proposal and review by Natural Heritage. And so there's going to be a fair amount of hoops to jump through, like any project, to be able to get to a point where this could be understood to be permittable. The fact that we would be impacting the Delta fields is also something that we would have to consider, since the Parks and Rec Master Plan talked about investing in the recommendations of that report. some of the longer term capital investments in the field renovations and reconstructions might have to be certainly considered as part of this whole proposal going forward. So this is really baby steps in the process, and the thought was, or the hope was, that we would get some feedback tonight that I could take to the town manager to understand if this was a go or no go from the commission standpoint. And if it's a go, I would say what it means is that we are free to explore this as a real option and then be able to come back with a formal proposal.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gasparo, I skipped over you. Did you have any comments?
Yeah, I have a couple. I'm certainly open to the discussion. What I notice is that, and I think would be helpful for future information, is to see, the parcels basically where the new campus is proposed is what we had already been considering for leased land. And so, how we had planned to use that. And then the fact that it was land that, was intended for development, probably along an industrial type of use. So I think that fits in with that. I noticed that, and Mr. McNeil briefly touched on it, but given all of the other discussion we're going to have next concerning endangered species, the actual Delta fields themselves right now, as well as the parcels where the DPW campus are proposed, are actually not currently mapped, but the airport housing and the rest of the fields are mapped. So, how does that trade-off happen? And really making sure that for the next level of discussions, that's a big part of the review process and stays sort of at the forefront, because we know from the other projects how challenging, the environmental permitting and mitigation and that sort of thing is. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Topham.
I'd like an explanation of the DPW campus. Is it their trucks or is it just offices? What is happening? What does that mean? Please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. This would be our entire operation, including the trucks, including the administrative offices, and all the shop space. So it's operations, facilities, and fleet management.
Just to clarify, Rob, no recycling or anything like that.
No, sir. This
Yeah,
is
that would be an issue with our wildlife attractant. So.
correct. That's a great point. The landfill operations, including all recycling and solid waste, composting, et cetera, would still be handled at the 188 campus, currently served by Waste Options Nantucket.
All right, well, I think it's the consensus of the commission that we support the concept, and the devil is in the details. So I would suggest it's appropriate to tell the town manager that we are very happy to talk further about this.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all your time into this so far. And thank you for the commission for listening tonight.
Rob, if I may suggest, we'll get together a meeting in the next couple of weeks to just lay out and define next steps.
Yes, that'd
and
be great.
how we can move forward with it. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. McNeil. Appreciate it.
Have a great evening.
All right, we are on to the final draft, hopefully, approval.
Well, Dan, I don't know that we got the ratification of the grant.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're correct. We did not. Was there, I don't remember even if there was a motion, so I'll ask for another motion to ratify the grant agreement for the Airport Coronavirus Relief Grant Program in the amount of $1,526,920. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll
Is there a
second.
second? Any further discussion? How do you vote, Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Ms. Planzer,
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Do we need to vote on the MassDOT ones too?
I'm gonna have to ask Katie. I believe so. We have grants for the stormwater inventory assessment and the purchase of the zero turn mower. But we only have an award letters and have not yet received the grants for the next two, the airport vehicle and seismic safety. So
Can we go ahead and approve those subject to receipt of those grant letters?
So, yes, so you could approve the two that we got in. And then maybe if you did like a separate motion that the commission says you can sign and you've already approved the other ones that haven't come in yet, that would
the
be super
grants, once it-
helpful. Or
Okay.
put it together in one motion. I'm gonna stop talking.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve the grant awards from MassDOT, the ASMP grant awards from MassDOT for the stormwater inventory assessment in the amount of $18,647.20 and the purchase zero turn mower for $11,176.70, as well as to approve in anticipation of receipt grant letters, grant awards for an airport vehicle, Ford F-350 with a plow for $48,553,000 and from seismic safety for $9,600.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? How do you vote, Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Okay, now we're on to the EIR. I'm sorry for delaying you a little bit, guys, but anyway, we're here. You've given us the revised agreement and given us the ability to track the changes. Is there anything you want to say about these changes? Mr. Lassen or Mr. Merrill?
I'll just say that they respond to the comments we got from the MIPA office and other commenters on the draft EIR, EA. We've added substantially more information on PFAS, information on the South Apron operations, looked at alternative sites, potential sites for the South Apron, added some information on stormwater, including Monahanset Road, flooding issue, added information on climate change and sea level rise and coastal erosion, and some additional information on noise and the potential noise berm or wall, as well as miscellaneous changes.
Was Mr. Gasparo's concern passed on to you about the A220s?
the
Yes.
power out.
Yeah,
And I understand what we had in there was incorrect, that they would power out of their position, but they would be towed out of the positions instead.
right. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go through the list and ask for comments from each commissioner. Ms. Topham, do you have any comments or questions? Ms. Planzer,
I do not.
Mr. Buscarin,
No, I don't.
Mr. Gasparo?
I do. So the comment that you just referenced, just to, I think if everybody's not aware, was with respect to the north parking space that I brought up at the last meeting at the north end of the proposed expansion for the parking of the A220. And I guess through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Merrow, will the final FEIR be updated? It currently reads that the position will enable the aircraft to use their power to move forward and complete a 180-degree turn. And if it's going to be that they're going to be towed out instead, how is that codified in terms of airport operations going forward.
Well, I think there are two questions there. One
Right.
is presumably the EAEIR will be edited to take out that incorrect information about the A220 powering out of that space. Is that correct?
That is correct. We'll revise that information and put the correct information in there.
Okay, and so the second question is, how does it get sort of cast in concrete in terms of airport operations going forward? That's probably a bad analogy, but it works.
I guess I'll answer that, or Mr. Chairman. I think that's an operational discussion with the airport on how they use that spot. That wouldn't be anything that we would say, I don't believe, in the EA, but it would be an operational decision by the airport.
We do not permit power out in any gate right now. So I don't know if we need to say that in the EA or just simply remove that. I think, Jed, you mentioned it earlier that you would reference that they would be towed in and out of the position or something to that effect.
Yes, we can certainly make that commitment in the EIR. I think the question that Mr. Gasparo is asking is how will that be made into airport policy and enforced?
We can make a standard operating procedure, ASI as we call them.
Okay, all right, Mr. Gasparo?
Yes, thank you. I think that would be helpful. And then do you want me to continue? So
Yes.
a lot of, we got this yesterday morning, so I'm not sure we're able to, click on it and download it. I don't know how many of the commissioners have had the time to, read it all, but the part I'm focused on, of course, remains this, mitigation related to the South Ramp expansion. And I remain concerned that that there are impacts that are going to happen to our community that have not been mitigated for. There's quite a discussion that was added, which I appreciated, under alternative 5A, which in the document is page 66. And again, it references the voluntary policy on APU units and the use of GPUs. But on the current ramp and current practice, we don't have that many GPUs compared to the amount of aircraft. We are limited in staff and ability to do that, which I respect. But again, it gets to the point of that it's included in here as how there will be mitigation, or there will be how the expansion won't have impacts. And I'm concerned that because the reality that we know from the existing ramp and all of those other factors, that there's very likely that there actually will be impacts. And that's where I remain concerned with the project. And again, how we get to a point where there would be enough GPUs, where there would be enough, and whether it would be enforcement or greater efforts towards the policy, and how ultimately, the staffing issue is addressed, which I respect and understand.
Excuse me, Mr. Gasparo. I would suggest that perhaps this is a topic that the planning subcommittee should take up in the beginning of the new fiscal year. So, shortly after the beginning of the new fiscal year, so that to the extent it's deemed necessary to purchase units and so forth, adequate financial plans can be made for the time when it's actually necessary to do this.
That's fine. It does. That's fine. I agree. But we also had, prior to this, an environmental subcommittee that recommended the berm, and we didn't get there. So, I could be hopeful, but the project's moving forward. And my final comment is really just that I will state that, in section 7.3625 under mitigation measures, it to just quote it, that the proposed projects are not expected to result in a significant adverse noise impact. Accordingly, the airport does not propose any mitigation measures with respect to this environmental resource. And because of that, I can't support this. And I hope that we had would have come to a point where we could have actually included mitigation measures. Thank you.
Anything else?
Nope.
Is there a motion to approve the final draft of the EIR as amended in the most recent draft we've seen, and with the comment about the 8220 turning incorporated?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote to approve the final draft of the EIR as annotated, as I noted a minute ago. How do you vote, Ms. Topham?
No,
Mr. Gasparo?
No.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Don't give up, Mr. Gasparo. We're not done with this.
Thank you. I do appreciate the work and the discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Merrill. Thank you, Mr. Glasden.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
The Air Service Incentive Program, Mr. Rafter.
Yes, we're asking approval to extend this for one more year. When we initially wrote this, we had it expiring, I believe, in April of this year. And we'd like to extend it with no additional changes, but we are looking to modify the incentive program. I was confused. I think when we originally wrote this, I thought we were only allowed to have it for 2 years, but apparently the airport program can go on as long as it deems necessary, but the benefit to an airline can only be a maximum of 2 years. So we're going to be looking to revamp the program, streamline it because it's quite a burden for Jamie to implement, and also basically scale back any incentives for seasonal service and focus on the year-round service. So I'd like to ask approval to extend the existing air service incentive program for one more year.
Through what, April 30th,
I believe that's it, yes.
2022?
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve extending the air service agreement incentive program through April 30th, 2022?
So
Don't
moved.
vote.
Is there a second?
second,
Thank you. Is there discussion? How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Mr. Rafter, minimum standards on section Q air
Section
freight operations.
Q, yes, this would codify what we addressed earlier in terms of the changes for how air freight can be handled through the terminal. So we would request approval of modification to this section of the minimum standards. And you will
Any
see,
question?
as I get further into statistics, you'll see how well the freight business is doing so.
Any questions? Is there a motion to approve the revised minimum standards for section Q air freight operations?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second,
Thank you, Mr. Buscarin. How do you vote? Any further discussion? How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Sorry, you keep jumping around on my screen, so I don't maintain the same rhythm. The warrant article for real estate, long-term lease authorization.
Yeah, my apologies for adding this last minute, but I think it's important that the commission approve this. It's in the warrant article, and I can read it if you don't mind, if you'll give me just a minute. It says, the way it reads is to see if the town will vote to allow the airport commission as provided by Chapter 90, Section 51F of the general laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to extend the period for leasing land for 20 years as referenced in Chapter 90, Section 51F to 40 years for parcels of land at Nantucket Memorial Airport off Old South Road for hangar development or other airport purposes. Said land is described as Assessor's Map 78, Parcel 1, Assessor's Map 69, Parcel 10.1, approximate boundaries of which are described in plans filed the Office of Town Clerk, or to take other actions in relation thereto. Again, this is simply to allow us to extend the term available for development of hangars and other third-party development. We've had feedback from investor developers that the investment they're making, they require a longer term than 20 years to amortize their investment. So we're looking to get an extension from 20 to 40 years. So I would like to ask the commission to approve that warrant article.
Are there any questions? Comments?
40
Hearing none.
years seems like a long time.
It is a long time.
And 10 to $20 million is a lot to invest.
Well, I know, but are there companies that are doing it, not individuals?
There are companies that are looking to, it's a company that's looking to invest and build a large hangar.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve the proposed warrant article to extend the long-term lease authorization to 40 years for certain airport parcels?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any other comments? How do you vote, Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscaron?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Budget transfers.
Before we get into the budget transfers, I'd like to just remind the commission that we are looking to increase the fuel revolver for FY22 as well as what we did this year, up to $4 million. And again, a lot of that has to do with the cost of fuel and what we're seeing is the activity. On the budget transfers, what you'll see here, you'll notice there's a number of items in the first section that we're moving money from, that's left over from other projects into the fuel farm rehabilitation project. And then as you go down a little further, we have, again, a transfer from the aviation fuel revolver and the retained earnings into the fuel farm rehabilitation project. Then at the bottom, you'll see a number of items there. One is a general transfer of about $250,000 into our operating budget. And that's to give us what we need to get through the year. Again, with Corona hitting us last year, we just need to make sure we're covered with all our costs. The remaining items are essentially, you may recall what we've been doing is closing out or paying for smaller projects through retained earnings rather than having to take them long-term and increasing our debt service. And by doing this, you'll see that we will reduce our remaining retained earnings balance down to about $476,000. Jamie has looked, she's given me an indication that she does expect that we'll have additional retained earnings after this year. But she hasn't been able to have the time to do an exact number. I would guess it's probably in the range of at least $1 million. I do want to bring one item to your attention, though, that may change. The bottom one there where it's directing or it's transferring money into the direct digital control system for the geothermal. We had anticipated doing that to increase from another 200 to 400,000. We put that project out to bid twice. We received no bids. We got a DCAM waiver and subsequently got a price in, but it was 500,000, and the initial estimate was 200,000. So we're re-looking at that, and we'll rebid the project probably in the fall. But again, I just wanted to make everyone aware, this is a time of year. What we do is we put these transfers together that goes to ATM. And I just want to make the commissioners aware of what we're doing with the budget transfers at the end of the year. There's one other item under the financial side. Crosswinds has, it's in your,
Excuse me, before we get into that, Mr. Rafter, I do have a question.
yeah,
What is the amount that we're seeking approval of for I mean, we have the $1 million in here towards the soil investigation, but what is the amount that we're seeking approval for the PFAS work that we've done? And
I
for
believe the
water
total is $8 million. Noah may know better, but I'm pretty sure that was the capital item. And I'm glad you brought that up, Dan. The FinCom yesterday had to revote on our capital item because they initially had only programmed the sponsor share for all of our AIP projects, and we have to appropriate the entire thing. They also consolidated the AIP projects into one. The PFAS is a separate item in the capital article, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was $8 million. Is Noah still here? I don't know if.
Yes, he is.
8 million. 8 million is correct, Tom.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, we're 8 million for the PFAS.
And that's one of the reasons we're trying to consolidate all these smaller ones and pay.
Yeah,
them
exactly. So that when we have a large project, it's going to hit our debt service. We know we're going to end up taking a chunk of it long term. We'd rather just clean these small ones up with the retained earnings that we have. So.
Okay. Now, do we need a motion to approve these transfers?
I don't think so. We normally just make this, make the commission aware of it. I don't think we've ever had an approval before. It's just, again, letting you know what we're doing with the money and the transfer of funds.
All right. Next.
The next item, it's in your packet. Crosswinds has requested an extension of the rent abatement for another 6 months. You may recall we allowed them to have a 50% rent abatement. It expired in February. And if this is granted, this would extend it through the end of August. We also will most likely be able to recoup a good portion of this through the CURSA and Rescue Fund grants that the FA is putting out for concessions. I would support this. I think they've done, they stayed open through the entire pandemic. They do their best to make things work. They are struggling. They got hit very hard, just like we did. And, it's like any other business on the island. You make hay when you can. And through last summer, normally what they would do is make the money to get them through, the winter. They didn't make the money then. They made some, I guess, recovered somewhat, but I would ask that you seriously consider this request.
Questions, comments? How much is the amount, the dollar amount? Do you know?
Oh, somebody mentioned it earlier. I forget exactly what it was. I don't know off the top of my head, Dan, but I will see if I can find that.
Well, it's less than $46,000, which is the amount of the.
I think the 46,000 is in one of the grants. There's a second grant coming out for additional funding for concessions.
Yeah. Okay, any questions or comments?
No, I agree for the abatement. They just had to close for 2 weeks at least because they had somebody with COVID, if I understand it correctly.
That's correct. They opened yesterday. Yes.
Yeah.
Is there a motion to approve Crosswinds rent abatement extension request?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I would only make the comment that I hope we can figure out a way to leverage this so that there is somebody occupying the gift shop space, whether it be some kind of pop-up for the summer, at least with, that isn't competing with Crosswinds.
Yeah.
So please work on that.
We'll see what we can do. Okay.
How do you, we have a motion? How do you vote, Ms. Topham? Aye.
Aye. Go.
Wanzer,
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Whew, manager's report.
All right, I'll try to make this painless. Taxiway Echo project restarted on March 30th. Some additional work in Taxiway Alpha area has been identified. The engineers made a recommendation. We have agreed to removing some small sections of work that would eliminate closing 624 for a number of days, and FAA has approved that, so we're going to go forward in that regard. Security for phase 2, work continues on the cameras and connectivity. That project is due to be substantially complete by the end of this month. However, we've asked the contractor to do some additional work, and they will be coming back most likely in the fall to do that, but it will have no direct impact on security. Fuel farm rehabilitation project, the bids are due in May 3rd for work to begin in the fall. Great Harbor Yacht Club piles ordered earlier. That work is to take place later this month. With regard to hangar development, Mr. Turner, who is looking to develop the large hangar, is the one that asked for the additional term. We are working with legal to finalize the lease agreement and develop some language to address some environmental issues there. Mr. Hagedorn's lease draft has been completed and is being sent to them for possible action consideration of the commission next month. RFP bid status, again, we talked about the harbor piles. I mentioned the HVAC and the issues we've had with that. The IFB for the overfill, we talked about that. You awarded that contract. Mentioned fuel farm bids and the hold room concession. We received no proposals the first time out, but we went out again. The deadline for those is May 7th. On the operational side of things, a reminder, the full-scale exercise will be taking place April 26th at 4 p.m. We're doing a lot of that virtually through Zoom. Without having to call a public meeting, we're going to have some involvement from the commissioner, the chair and vice chair. A lot of it's going to just be a communications exercise, so you'll probably be getting a notice, and we'll go through that with you prior to it. FAA certification inspection is scheduled for May 26th to the 28th. This past weekend, MassDOT had their contractor out do PCI survey work. Our maintenance department has been actively working on addressing the stormwater basins, the catch basins. There were 45 that were identified, that were inspected, 16 required cleaning, and so far they've done at least 12, I think even more of those by now, and they're following up on that report and consolidating the work that's been done. I mentioned capital projects and FinCom action took place yesterday. Just a note, fuel sales for March were up 60% or $65,000. That's good, but still hasn't recovered from the hit we took over the summer. Air service announcements just continue to come in. I think some of the latest ones, if you haven't heard, JetBlue will be flying to Newark. American's going to be flying to Chicago, as well as United. Elite is going to be flying to Westchester, and we have a request from Boutique to be able to fly to Boston. So we keep getting more and more announcements. We have to figure out where we're going to put these aircraft. We received a notice from our fuel supplier recently that is interesting. They're expressing a bit of a concern with the supply chain because of the lack of truck drivers that are available. So we're working to manage that accordingly and we'll put the orders in as early as we can to maintain the levels that we need. Any questions before I go on to statistics? Okay, operations are down 38.5% for February, year to date down 31%. Southwest GA operations continue to climb. They're up 49% in February. Employments are down 42%, year to date 58. Cape Air statistics, they saw a 42% decrease in employments. Trade winds was up 9% or 160 passengers. The Boston market, Cape Air had a 54% decrease. New Bedford's flat. Hyannis for February is down 39%. JFK, Cape Air carried 5 passengers on 4 flights, and the Vineyard traffic was down 17%. The jet fuel for February was up 93.6%, and year to date down 6.1%. For March, it was up 48, almost 49%. Avgas was down 5.2 for February, 18.4 year to date, and March it was up 81.4%. Freight, as I mentioned, is doing very well. It's up 80.37% over last February. Year to date, up 30%. Cape Air did very well, increased from 1,795 pounds to 33,414 pounds. The mail carried by Cape Air was up 50%. FedEx was up 31%, and UPS was up 63%. So freight's booming.
Is Cape Air doing anything to advertise the service?
Not that I'm aware of, Dan. I haven't seen anything.
I
They may
haven't
be on
seen
the
any, but I
inside.
was just curious.
And noise, there were no complaints in February or March, just like last year. Personnel report, we're obviously starting to bring on a number of seasonals, trainings beginning. So we're gearing up for the activity that we anticipate this summer. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
No.
Before we go on, I should note that Christina Marshall of Anderson and Krieger has joined us, presumably for the executive session that's about to follow. Welcome. Are there any commissioners' comments?
No.
Hearing none, seeing none. I don't believe there's any public in attendance, so there is no public comment. I will then entertain a motion to go into executive session, not to return to public session under General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to review executive session minutes as enumerated in the agenda and for possible release, and to review the minutes for the March 9th, 2021 executive session for review and possible release. Under Clause 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements regarding proposed transportation security actions where the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the security of the airport. And under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to the litigation regarding Walsh where the chair has determined that an open session may have detrimental effect on the litigating position of the airport.